A press junket for Clint Eastwood's latest film had attracted journalists from around the country, including a 26-year-old writer named Marcus Webb who had built his reputation on aggressive confrontation. When his turn came to ask questions, Marcus didn't ask. He attacked. He called Clint's films recycled violence for people who can't handle nuance and accused him of coasting on an image that hasn't evolved in 2 decades. The room went silent. Every journalist expected Clint to shut the interview down, or worse. Instead, Clint said something that made Marcus freeze mid-sentence. What followed over the next 45 minutes would transform Marcus Webb's entire approach to journalism and teach everyone present a lesson about the difference between provocation and curiosity. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel had been converted into a press circuit. Journalists rotated through interview rooms, each getting 15 minutes with the stars and director of the new film. The schedule was tight, the questions predictable, the answers polished to generic smoothness. Clint Eastwood sat at the end of a long table flanked by publicists who monitored each interaction for signs of trouble. He had done hundreds of these events over the years. They were part of the job, necessary promotion that he tolerated rather than enjoyed. The questions were usually the same. How did you prepare for the role? What attracted you to the project? What's next? Occasionally, a journalist tried something different. Usually, it didn't go well for the journalist. Marcus Webb entered the room at 2:15 p.m. He was young, ambitious, and had made his name by confronting celebrities in ways that other journalists considered too aggressive. His interviews generated attention, not always for the content, but for the conflict. The publicist noted his name on the list and tensed slightly. Marcus took his seat across from Clint. He didn't introduce himself, didn't offer pleasantries. He opened his notebook, clicked his pen, and looked directly at Clint with the expression of someone preparing for combat. Mr. Eastwood, I've watched your films. Most of them, anyway. That's dedication. It's research. And my conclusion is that your work is essentially recycled violence for people who can't handle nuance. The same masculine fantasies dressed up in different costumes. Westerns, cop movies, whatever sells tickets. The room went cold. The publicist started to rise, ready to end the interview before it became a liability. Clint raised a hand, stopping her. Go on. You've been coasting on an image that hasn't evolved in 2 decades. The squint, the gun, the tough guy persona. It was interesting in the 60s. Now it's just lazy. You're not an artist. You're a brand manager. Marcus sat back, satisfied with his opening salvo. Every journalist in the room expected the interview to end. Clint was quiet for a moment. His expression was unreadable, not angry, not defensive, not amused, just thoughtful, as if he were considering the accusations carefully rather than reacting to the provocation. Let me ask you something, he finally said. Sure. What do you hope to accomplish with this approach? What approach? The confrontation, the insults, calling my work lazy and me a brand manager. What's the goal? Marcus hesitated. He had expected anger or dismissal or the kind of cold shutdown that celebrities used when journalists crossed lines. He hadn't expected a calm question that forced him to examine his own methods. I'm trying to get honest answers. Most interviews are rehearsed nonsense. I cut through that. By insulting people? By challenging them. There's a difference. Is there? Because what I heard was insults. Not questions, not challenges, just attacks. Where's the journalism in that? I asked a question underneath the statement, whether your work has evolved, whether you're still challenging yourself. No, you didn't. You made declarative statements designed to provoke. Recycled violence, lazy, brand manager. Those aren't questions, those are conclusions, presented as facts. They're observations based on watching your films. Then let's discuss those observations. Which films did you watch? What specifically do you find repetitive? What would evolution look like to you? He had come with insults, expecting them to generate either memorable confrontation or defensive reactions he could quote. He hadn't come with genuine analysis, specific examples, or thoughtful questions about artistic development. I've seen most of your major films. Name 3 that demonstrate the pattern you're describing. The Westerns. The cop movies. They're all which specific westerns, which specific cop movies, you're making broad claims. Back them up. What had begun as Marcus attacking Clint had become Clint calmly exposing the emptiness of Marcus's approach. The other journalists were watching with undisguised interest. Look, Marcus said, I didn't come here for a debate about film criticism. You came to call my work lazy. That's criticism. You should be able to defend it. I was making a point about your overall body of work. A point requires evidence. Specific films, specific choices. Specific patterns you can identify and analyze. You haven't provided any of that. Because this is a 15-minute interview, not a dissertation. It's 15 minutes you chose to spend insulting me instead of asking actual questions. That was your choice. Now I'm asking you to justify it. Marcus set down his pen. For the first time, his confidence was visibly shaken. Fine. You want specifics? Your characters don't grow. They start as stoic tough guys and end as stoic tough guys. The plots are built around violence as the solution to every problem. There's no psychological depth, no moral complexity. Have you seen Honky Tonk Man? No. Breezy. What's breezy? Clint leaned back in his chair. You've described a pattern based on a sample that excludes the films that contradict your theory. That's not analysis. That's selection bias. Those films aren't representative. Of what? My work? I directed them. I chose those projects. They're as representative as anything else. But they're not what you're known for. Known for by who? Audiences? Critics? People who haven't seen most of my work but have opinions about all of it? Marcus was silent. Let me tell you something about journalism, Clint continued. The job is to find truth, to ask questions that illuminate rather than provoke, to understand before you judge. What you've been doing, this aggressive confrontation style, it might get attention. It might generate clicks or controversy, but it doesn't reveal anything true. It just reveals your assumptions. I have a right to express my views, and I have a right to ask whether those views are based on anything substantial. So far, you haven't shown me that they are. The publicist checked her watch. Mr. Eastwood, we have other journalists waiting. Can we extend this one? The publicist looked surprised. Extend it? I think there's a productive conversation happening. If the other journalists don't mind waiting, she consulted quickly with the schedule coordinator. We can give you another 30 minutes. If Mr. Webb agrees. Marcus didn't know what to say. He had come to attack and had been systematically disarmed. Now the target of his attack was asking for more time, not to retaliate, but apparently to continue a discussion. I'll stay. Good. Clint gestured to a chair closer to the table. Sit over here. Let's actually talk. Marcus moved to the closer seat. The dynamic had shifted completely. What had begun as confrontation was becoming something else. Genuine dialogue. Tell me about your career, Clint said. My career? How long have you been a journalist? 4 years. Started right out of college. And the confrontational style? When did that start? About 2 years ago. I was covering entertainment and getting nowhere. The standard interviews were boring. The pieces were forgettable. I decided to try something different. Different how? More aggressive. Asking the questions other journalists were afraid to ask. Challenging celebrities to justify themselves. And it worked. My pieces got noticed. Editors started assigning me higher profile subjects. So the confrontation became your brand, your identity as a journalist. I suppose so. Clint nodded slowly. That's interesting. Because you accused me of the same thing, having a brand that hasn't evolved, being known for one thing and coasting on it. Marcus felt the parallel land. That's different. Is it? You found something that worked and kept doing it? I found something that worked and kept doing it. The difference is that I've also tried things outside my comfort zone. Have you? I write different kinds of pieces. With the same approach? The same confrontational style? Marcus was quiet. Here's what I've learned about brands, Clint continued. They're useful for getting attention. They're limiting for growth. If you're known for one thing, People expect that thing. They don't give you room to try something else. So you're saying my style is limiting me? I'm asking whether you've considered that possibility. You came in here with a theory about my career. I'm offering a theory about yours. The difference is that I'm asking questions instead of making accusations. Marcus sat with the observation. He had spent 2 years building a reputation on aggressive confrontation. It had worked. He was here, interviewing Clint Eastwood, getting attention that other journalists his age couldn't get. But what had it cost? He thought about the interviews he had done, the celebrities who had shut down after his opening attacks, the conversations that could have been illuminating but became defensive because of his approach. Let me ask you something, Marcus said. Go ahead. When I came in here with those insults, why didn't you just end the interview? That's what most people do. Because most people react. I prefer to respond. What's the difference? Reaction is automatic. It's letting someone else control you. Response is considered. It's choosing how to engage. And you chose to engage. I chose to find out whether there was something underneath the aggression, whether you were worth the time. And? Marcus asked. And I think you might be. You're young. You're hungry. You found a method that gets results. But you haven't asked yourself whether those results are actually serving you. What do you mean? You get attention. That's clear. But what kind of attention? What reputation are you building? In 10 years, will you be known as a journalist who revealed truth? Or as a journalist who was entertaining to watch but never said anything substantial? That's a harsh way to put it. You were willing to be harsh with me. I'm being honest with you. Marcus absorbed this. So what's the alternative? Softball questions that celebrities ignore? No. The alternative is curiosity. Genuine curiosity about the person you're interviewing. About what makes them interesting, complicated, contradictory. You ask questions because you actually want to know the answers, not because you want to provoke a reaction. Show me, Marcus said. Interview me the way you think I should have interviewed you. Clint smiled slightly. All right. Marcus, you mentioned that you started using the confrontational style about 2 years ago. What happened 2 years ago that made you change? Marcus thought about it. I had been doing standard entertainment coverage for 2 years. Forgettable pieces. My editor told me I needed to find a voice, something that distinguished me from every other young journalist trying to make it. And confrontation was the answer you found. It was the answer that worked. I wrote a piece challenging a famous director about his treatment of actors on set. It went viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to read what I wrote. And how did that feel? Amazing. Like, I finally mattered. So the confrontation isn't really about journalism. It's about mattering. Marcus felt something shift. He had never articulated it that way, even to himself. But Clint had identified something true. The aggression wasn't about finding truth. It was about being noticed, being taken seriously, mattering in an industry where thousands of young journalists competed for attention. I think you're right. There's nothing wrong with wanting to matter, but there are different ways to achieve it. Confrontation is fast. It gets immediate attention, but it also limits what you can learn because people shut down when they feel attacked. So, what's the alternative? Earning trust. Asking questions that show you've done your homework. Demonstrating that you're interested in understanding, not just scoring points. It takes longer, but it produces better journalism. And better relationships? That too. I remember journalists who challenged me fairly. I remember the ones who insulted me too, but I don't talk to them again. You get one shot at a first impression. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology. For what, specifically? For saying you had nothing to offer but recycled violence. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was performing confrontation without substance behind it. Apology accepted. Just like that? What else would you have me do? Hold a grudge. You made a mistake. You recognized it. That's growth. Most people in your position wouldn't be so forgiving. Most people react instead of responding. I try to do differently. Marcus nodded. Can I ask you something about your career? A real question, not an attack? Go ahead. What do you do when you're not sure if a project is worth doing? When you don't know if it'll work? I ask myself whether I'll regret not doing it, whether 5 years from now I'll wish I had taken the risk. If the answer is yes, I do it. It tells you something didn't work. Success is information too. It tells you something did work. Neither defines you. What defines you is whether you keep trying. That's not what I expected you to say. What did you expect? Something about confidence, about knowing you're right. That's the image. The certain, decisive, tough guy. The person has doubts like anyone else. The difference is whether you let doubts stop you or let them inform you. Marcus wrote in his notebook. Genuinely wrote, not the performative note-taking he had been doing earlier. This is the interview I should have been doing from the start. Better late than never. Marcus gathered his things but hesitated before standing. Can I ask one more thing? Spend 45 minutes with someone who insulted you. Because I saw something worth the time. A young journalist who had talent, but was using it wrong. I've been given opportunities I didn't deserve. Seems fair to pass that along. By teaching me a lesson. By having a conversation. The lesson is whatever you take from it. Thank you for not just shutting me down. Clint shook it. Thank you for being willing to listen. That's rarer than you might think. Not the hit piece he had planned, the one that would have quoted Clint's defensive reactions and painted him as unable to handle legitimate criticism. He wrote something different. I went into the Clint Eastwood interview intending to expose what I saw as the limitations of his career. I came out exposed instead, confronted with the limitations of my own approach to journalism. Eastwood didn't react to my attacks with anger or defensiveness. He asked questions. He challenged me to back up my claims, and when I couldn't, he didn't gloat. He offered to help me understand where I had gone wrong. The lesson wasn't about Eastwood's films. It was about how we engage with people we've already decided to dismiss. I had made up my mind before I walked into that room. I wasn't seeking truth. I was seeking confirmation of what I already believed. That's not journalism. That's performance. The piece was published the following week. The article generated significant attention, not because of confrontation or controversy, but because a journalist had publicly admitted to being wrong, had acknowledged that his methods had been flawed, had demonstrated the humility that his aggressive approach had been designed to avoid showing. Editors noticed, colleagues noticed, readers noticed. The piece became something of a touchstone for discussions about journalism ethics, about how reporters should engage with their subjects, about the difference between provocation and curiosity. Marcus received letters from other young journalists asking how to balance aggressive questioning with genuine engagement. He didn't have perfect answers, but he had the beginning of a framework. Marcus Webb continued his journalism career for another 30 years. His style evolved. He maintained the willingness to ask difficult questions, but approached subjects with genuine curiosity rather than predetermined conclusions. He became known for interviews that revealed something true, not because they were confrontational, but because they were thoughtful. He never forgot the 45 minutes in that hotel room. When he taught journalism classes in his later career, he told the story, not as a celebrity encounter, but as a lesson about the purpose of the profession. Your job is to illuminate, not to attack, to understand, not to dismiss, to reveal truth, not to confirm your assumptions. The best interview I ever conducted started with me insulting the subject and ended with him teaching me how to do my job. If you're lucky enough to receive it, don't waste it. A young journalist insulted Clint. His reply changed the tone instantly. But the real change wasn't in the tone of the conversation. The real change was in the journalist himself. Marcus Webb entered that room believing that aggression was strength, that confrontation revealed truth, that attacking his subjects made him a better journalist. He left understanding that curiosity was stronger than aggression, that questions revealed more than accusations, that the best journalism came from genuine interest in understanding people, not from predetermined conclusions about them. Clint Eastwood could have ended that interview in the first 2 minutes. He could have given Marcus exactly the defensive reaction Marcus was seeking. He could have confirmed every assumption Marcus had walked in with. Instead, he responded instead of reacting. He asked questions instead of attacking. He taught instead of dismissed. That's the difference between someone who wields power and someone who wields wisdom. A young journalist insulted Clint. What happened next didn't make headlines. It made a difference.